Hi, so I want to talk about secondary suites because I had a lot of clients that are looking about adding and they want to know about creating a legal secondary suite, not just any kind of secondary suite. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the requirements. I've done a lot of research on this with the city of Calgary. I think it's a great new thing. I just want you guys to know that regarding legal versus not legal suites, it works out to about 2.5% of suites that are actually legal in the city. So we're going to go over what the complications are, and I'm not going to go over how to convert one. I'm going to go over how to create a new one. So most of my clients are always looking for a bungalow or something they can create a basement suite. That's what we're going to talk about: a detached house with a basement suite in it. Okay, so let's get right into this. Okay, so let's talk about permitting and just talk a little bit about zoning. So what I discussed with on the phone with the city planning was is that if the property is got R2 zoning, then you don't need a you can go ahead with a development permit. Actually, you can go ahead with a building permit to do it, and you don't need a development permit. So because it's already considered a use for the property. Now, if it is RC1, you can put a suite in. Now, what you have to have is a development permit. So that's something you have to apply for, and it takes about 2 months to apply for that as an owner. I did ask about applying for it before you took ownership, and they actually said you could do that. You could, once you have a purchase contract, you could apply for a development permit for the area. So that's something that can be done. Okay, so let's get into uh, the actual requirements you need, because that's what most people want to know is what are the requirements. Okay, so first of all, the ceiling and door heights. Ceiling and door heights have to be minimum 1.95 meters, and underneath any venting is 1.85 meters. Doors within the suite may reduce to 1.89 meters where required. Okay, so they're saying that you can have a door under a duct, but I guess to some degree it can't be too low of a door. So now, separation of suites. Now, this is was a big discussion I had with them at the city, and it was basically what smoke type. They want a smoke type separation. And don't ask me why, because I my concern as an agent is that anything, in my view, that would be acceptable for an owner to have a child or anybody sleeping in the basement should be acceptable for a tenant. But for some reason, the city wants us to have um, you know, it's almost like it has to be over the top to be a legal suite. Okay, so smoke type tight separation means that they want half-inch drywall on the ceiling that's taped and painted to provide smoke, so smoke and sound can't travel. So, and in the utility areas, they want a fire grade drywall that would have nothing behind it. So, in other words, they don't want wiring behind it. They don't want boxes behind it. They want almost a clean room that holes are put into, so that none of the wiring or the plumbing or the gas lines would be behind this drywall within the fire grade drywall within the utility room. Not sure exactly how that works out, because some of these are going to have um, everything removed in order to be putting new venting into, or taking the venting out and then putting it back in so that it can be sealed, so that there's no possibility. And even using a fire rated silicone to seal all the vents so smoke can't get through to the next level. So the other thing was the of course the doors entering the suite have to have a self-closing device. The big thing that I talked about them with was soundproofing. What do they want for soundproofing? So I was commercial buildings are they allow for like a suspended tile ceiling, and of course that's soundproofing as well as a lot of things suspended. But they don't allow suspended ceiling. They want drywall and they want everything taped. So, and I asked them, so if for just for soundproofing, why wouldn't they go with say poly for smoke and or an insulation for sound? They didn't like that because they said that doesn't give you anything for fire. So basically they want drywall and they want joist bases with sound absorbing material less than 150 millimeter thickness, filling stud space with sound absorbing material that there's resilient channel. So here's what most people don't realize. So they want this resilient channel separation space 400 to 600 millimeters. So resilient channel. Here's what this stuff looks like. So this is resilient channel is basically like a U-shaped bar that goes on the underside of the joists, and the U-shaped bar is what you're going to attach the drywall to. And they're not asking for a vapor barrier; they just want the insulation for sound, and then they want this strapping on the bottom of everywhere so that the sound doesn't travel. Now, I don't know how good that is, but that is what they're asking for with the compromised heights of a lot of ceilings. This is just one more thing to add some complexity to it, but that's what they're asking. Now they're also looking for smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms, and what they're asking for is they can't be battery operated. They have to be for hardwired, fire alarms or heat sensors and things like that. So that's what they're looking for there, and they have to be they have to be centrally located in the primary dwelling, the secondary suite, common spaces, mechanical rooms. So they're asking for everything that every livable space to have these sensors in, and they, like I said, they can't be battery operated. They got to be hardwired, not just for the suite. Legal suites have to have separate entrances, which means that they must have now that for a lot of these bungalows it can work out, because basically usually the older bungalows had a stairway that was brilliantly located at the back of the house, on the right or the left hand side, and usually they went left up to the kitchen or right up to the kitchen, and then down the stairs, so you can lock off one door and then you can go down there. So they worked out very, very well. And so the stairway needs to be minimum width 860 millimeters. That could be a problem in some houses. Handrails need to be there, of course. That's a requirement. The light fixture has to be above, so that it has to be a well lighted stair. A landing must provide it at the top of the stairs. The landing must be at least 860 millimeters long, as wide as the stairs. That's very important to have a landing. And it needs to be at the bottom. I see quite oftentimes people they have a door at the bottom with no landing, so that can't work. Doors serving the exit are minimum 810 millimeters wide and 1.89 millimeters high. These are just standard size doors, so that's not something that's so unique. Now, egress windows. We all know when we've heard about this. I've actually did some research into this, and so of course you don't need egress windows in the living area. You just need them in the bedrooms, right? So the bedrooms have to be, and they've got the specifications here. Now, I did some research with a window company that does cut windows in the concrete. They told me about $2,600 a window, including the window, the cutting, the corrugated or the galvanized window box that would go into, attached to the wall, and the drain put in, the crushed rock, and everything else. They can do that. I asked them if they could do that in the wintertime, and they said, yeah, well, anything colder than -8 is a problem, because it's a wet saw and things start to freeze. But up to -8, they can put the windows in, and they can get it all done for you. And they said they have windows in stock. They can usually get things together within about a couple of weeks. You can call me regarding a referral to that company. One thing the city builder the inspector was talking about was the exterior entrances that are created. Now, so this has come sometimes in newer houses. We see this because the stairway doesn't work out for putting a suite in the basement, so people are digging out and putting an entrance down. These are pretty expensive. Usually I see these costing around $10,000-$12,000 for people to dig out the back of the house and then put this entrance to the back with a railing. Now, when you do this, they're saying that you need to go a little more than a meter. Generally, it's 4 feet for the frost level, and you have to create a foundation underneath there that's insulated. So this gets to be expensive only because of that, and then it's got to be a drain and everything else. Most of the suites I see people putting into older houses because there's nothing required to do that. So this gets to be an expensive part of a renovation on on a newer home. In regards to plumbing, secondary suites must have a supply of hot water. Now, they're not saying that it needs to have a separate hot water. You can use the main hot water heater, from what I'm told. And they need to have a kitchen sink, bathroom sink, toilet, and a bathtub or a shower. Backflow prevention device on branch drains of the sewer line. Most houses have this, but in some of the older houses, you'll have to put that in. So, but backflow prevention is always a good idea anyway. because in case the sewer backs up, it doesn't fill the basement with what things you don't want. When it comes to electrical, I had a long conversation about that. It's not required to have separate meters or separate electrical. What is required is that the service meets the amperage required and the watts required to run what you want to run there. So typically these older houses had 100 amp service. So with 100 amp service, what you might be taxed with is that oftentimes if you want to run 2 laundries, it comes down to 2 ovens and two dryers. These are what take the most power. Typically the suites, running LED lights and all the rest of it, the lights are not the main cause of power. And so that's something that, you could alter that by going to say with a gas dryer. That might be an option. Obviously, if you have a shared laundry and upstairs is sharing with the downstairs, then that might not tax the system, as there's only one dryer that's being used. So, but you might be able to get around this by, like I say, using a gas dryer, maybe possibly a gas stove. It doesn't say anywhere that you have to use the electric stove. What I've been told by a few people that want to do it, they said that 100 amp service for what they wanted to do wasn't going to be enough to do the upstairs with the load and the suite. So they were to have to upgrade to 200 amp service, which means that not only when you do that do you need to do the panel, but you need to do the service from the pole. Now, if you're the service to the pole, meaning you need a bigger wire, so that can cost you. Generally, putting a new panel is probably anywhere a couple $1,000 to put a panel in, and then you got to put a new wire in. You might be into $4,000 or $5,000 by the time you're done, making the services and putting everything in. Now, having said that, what I've learned is that on permits, you can actually pull your own permit for doing electrical, as long as you're going to occupy the property. So if you legally own the home and you're going to live in the property and rent out the basement, then you can pull your own permits. That might save you a lot of money, but for plumbing or whatever else you want to do. But if you're going to just be a rental and you're not actually going to live in the property, then it means that you have to have a contractor to do the permits and pull them and close them out. So that's something that may be a little bit complicated for some people. Now, if you legally own the home, or if you recently purchased the property, you can actually request to get permits for doing wiring and plumbing before you own the property. They're saying here now that they're willing to allow you to pull permits, which they never did until you had ownership. So in other words, if you want to get this property and get things on the go before you actually own it, you can actually, as long as you've got a purchase contract that conditions are removed on, you can start acting on pulling, actually getting permits in place for what you want to do. Now, it might seem ridiculous if you want to put a sink in for a kitchen, because that's all that most people are going to do. Usually the bathroom is down there already. They may ask you, if there's no record of permits for a bathroom, to get a permit for an existing bathroom, which might be harder to do. I don't know how they would handle that, but basically, if you're going to put a sink in, which is quite simple, they're going to ask you to have a permit with a sink, and you're going to have a vent for the sink drain as well. So if you're repairing a leak or replacing existing faucets, removing a blockage, there's no permit required for that. But if you're going to do any gas fitting or anything else like that, you might require. Now it gets to concealed wiring and plumbing. So the city inspector is likely going to ask you if there was already pre-wiring and done by previous owner, homeowner, or anything else. For your approval, they're going to want to look at all that stuff. So they may have you rip off any drywall or any finishing that was already there, which could include a bathroom. I don't know what they're going to do about anything under the concrete. I suppose they could use some sort of camera to go inside to find out if what's been done is correct. But as far as wiring, they're going to ask for everything that's tied into, because anything that's been altered needs now to pass a new code. This is where we're at with things. As long as you don't want to alter anything, then of course you don't have nothing has to really be touched. But as soon as you touch something, now everything has to pass code. Did this with my garage to pull my own electrical permit on my garage, put an office above. Not only did they inspect my wiring for the office I created above the garage, but they wanted to recertify all of the wiring that was in the garage that had been permitted before, which means they had to look at all that again. So that's how that works. Now the big bone of contention is the furnace or heating system. This is where we run into a lot of problems because they're asking for a legal secondary suite to have its own furnace or heating system. They didn't say that it has to have a furnace. Or it doesn't have to be forced air. It just has to be controlled by the tenant. Now I don't understand this in my estimation, as far as I'm concerned. Anything that would be good for the homeowner to use with having a child or an adult sleeping in the basement should be acceptable for a tenant. But the city has made it as complicated as they possibly can in some respects by having people have a secondary heating system, which I've looked at possible scenarios, 3 possible scenarios. The cheapest install is going to be electric baseboard heat, and that has to be hardwired into the unit. You can't have plug-in heaters. So the only problem with this electric baseboard heat is going to be the cost of running it. Of course, electric baseboard heaters cost a lot to run. That's why people don't run them. That's why we use natural gas, because it's the cheapest thing going. So putting a furnace in, you're looking at probably $6,000 to $10,000 to put a secondary furnace in with all the venting that has to go in and be put into there. The problem with a lot of these properties is the space required for secondary furnace. Of course, you got a high efficiency furnace going into the basement, and then you need all the ducting and everything else to go along with it. So the other alternative would be to run in-floor heat, which is hydronic. I checked on this, and you can run either electric, in-floor heat under some tile or some laminate floor. There's that option. But again, electric is going to be expensive. And then the other part is running, say, hydronic. So that's water heat. So running PEX tubing through. Now they have foam board insulation that has the routing already in it for running like a 3/8 hydronic PEX tubing into. And you could run a boiler, which would be very, very small, and that might work out quite well. Problem with that is that the cost of the board itself to put on the floor, the foam board, is about $8 a square foot. $5.50 US, but $8 a square foot. So it lays on the floor. You run the hydronic through it. Then you run a boiler system that heats the floor. Now, you may not have to get an individual boiler. You could probably run off of a newer hot water heater that would have a heat exchanger within that. And then you could run zone control in the basement. But you're looking at about 900 square feet times about 850 square foot for the flooring. And then you're going to have to run flooring over top of it. You're going to have to run the heat runs through this foam. And the foam is really required. It's about 5/8 thick, so it doesn't take up too much space as far as head space is concerned. And then you're going to run 3/8 PEX tubing in that and run possibly different zones, or maybe even one zone for the basement, and then run a thermostat. So still, you're looking at probably about $10,000 for the heating system. So it kind of is up in the air whether or not you want to run a furnace or you want to run in-floor heat. If you run in-floor heat, they're asking for another unit, and that is what's called a heat recovery ventilator. Basically what it is that you run some venting in from the outside, you get the outside air, and it's a heat exchange unit that exchanges the air, doesn't lose so much heat, and it basically allows new fresh air to come in the house so that the air doesn't get stale, because with electric heat the air can get stale. So the heat recovery unit will basically pull inside air out and circulate it through a heat exchanger, and then pull cold air in through the heat exchanger, and then turn around and push that I guess it is a little bit of heat, recovery heat, with fresh air into the property again, so that the air is fresh in the property and doesn't get stale. Now these units kind of run anywhere between I looked at them as low as about $1,000. So that's something, but that doesn't include any venting, of course. And I don't think you need a lot of venting, but you need some venting there. Now, obviously, the main reason why you want to do a legal suite, and again, there's only 2.5% of suites that are legal in the city, and it's because of all these regulations. And the biggest one being that they're trying to get this heating system is one of the biggest things that people have a problem with because it's the most expensive part of the system. That's what's causing people not to put them in. And if you ask me, I think it's ridiculous because if they make it expensive, then that higher rent is a cause for increasing the cost to the the owner of the property to make the suite, and then of course they've got to transfer that extra cost to the renter, which is looking for the lowest cost rent they can possibly get. But the obviously advantage of having the legal suite is that you can use the legal suite um, as part of the calculation the bank uses to finance the property. So this is a big thing to have. A legal suite is so that you can, helps people qualify for that next mortgage. Or if you want to buy multiple properties, you can use the basement suite income to qualify for the next property you're going to buy. So I think it's valuable. And call me for more information on finding a property that would be a good probability to suite. There's still some more regulations regarding windows and where they need to be and the types of property, and I can steer you as far as the type of property that would work best for a suite. And I created a video on that. It's actually on my channel. Thanks so much, and you have a great day.